I'm Kathy Luer, CEO of My 4-Year Plan, and I'm super excited to have with me tonight Chris Ference, who is an industrial design major at Rochester Institute of Technology. And I've been working with Chris through the latter part of high school on helping him prepare for college and for his major. And I thought it would be really great for students who are interested in considering this field and have more questions about it to be able to talk with somebody who is right in the midst of it. So Chris, it is so good to see you.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so tell us where you're at in school, what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm a freshman at RIT, and this year's been good. It obviously cut short a little bit because of everything that's going on. But yeah, I've been in the industrial design program, but being at RIT, I've been able to collaborate with a lot of the other students from like new media and UI UX design, which is like product design, along with graphic design, along with like engineering students and such. But so it really, I think RIT is a good place to study industrial design. I'm not advertising for RIT, but it has a lot of those other majors, and industrial design is a very kind of collaborative major.
So for a student who really is not sure what industrial design means,
Right.
could you just kind of explain what that is?
Yeah, so as an industrial designer, you design products and experiences for a certain client. Now, the kind of traditional example is like thinking of like your iPhone, it's like someone had to like think through all the different parts of your phone from, how is it all going to fit into this? They have to communicate with the engineers and the marketing people to see how to really sell the product. So there's all sorts of different technical kind of standards and such that have to be fit into the product. And then also marketing, advertising. So that's all kind of channeled through the designers, and they kind of really make a lot of the decisions of how it comes together in the form of it, and how someone would go about using the product. So overall, it's designing kind of products and experiences, and that can either be at a consultancy level, where independent kind of companies are coming to you to design whatever their product may be, or that would be at like a corporate level, like Apple, or if you want to design cars, Ford, where they're saying you're working for them and you're obviously going to be developing either an electronic device or a car. But yeah, those are kind of two types of design.
So could this also be designing furniture, designing shoes, designing Frisbees? Where does industrial design sort of begin and end?
Right. So there's a lot of different fields with design, a lot of different product categories, along with different types of design. So one kind of type that you can study is like design strategy, and you can be a design strategist. So that would take on like the very beginning part of a project, where you would kind of analyze the market, see, what kind of opportunities are out there, and communicate that information, do all the research, communicate that to your client or your firm, so that information we take in by other industrial designers through the whole cycle of brainstorming and coming up with ideas to create something great. But there's also a lot of different categories for products. So it ranges from electronics, which is like very much like Silicon Valley, kind of like everything in San Francisco that's very tech heavy, to cars, so automotive design, both interior and exterior of that. Then you also have home goods, so companies that make desk trays and like everything that you need for like a desk or office supplies, along with furniture, all sorts of types of chairs, lighting as well. That's a whole other thing. So there's a lot of different kind of categories that you can go into as a designer. I have a friend that worked in like toy design. So they actually did, it was like pet products. So like their whole job for 3 years was to design pet toys. So there's so many kind of small areas of design. If you want to just design one specific thing, there's probably a category for that. You mentioned Frisbees, like obviously like you might not just be doing that, but right here in Pittsburgh is Dick's Sporting Goods, and they're hiring industrial designers to do all sorts of outdoor gear and such. And maybe you'd work for a company, like an outdoor company, and part of their products might be Frisbees or whatever. But there's a lot of different ways that you can go with industrial design.
And you talked about collaborating with engineers and graphic designers. So can you speak to that a little bit more? I'm imagining that with an engineer, particularly a software engineer, than if you were doing the Apple or the iPhone. The
Right.
engineer's job, kind of like, how would you see your job intersecting with an engineer or another kind of graphic designer thing, anything like that?
Right, right. So someone would probably come to us saying, "Hey, this is what we kind of would like to see in the future phone." And then as a designer, so that would be like a design researcher or a design strategist. They would come to the industrial designer and say, "Hey, we want these like we want to create kind of different concepts for a phone or whatever it is." So as a designer, you would kind of develop those forms and render it and present it in a way to the engineers, marketing people, and everyone in the room, everyone in the company, and get various different opinions on it. So from that, the engineer would ask, is this practical? Can we fit this big a battery into this device? The marketing person would ask, like what's the new features that we can do to sell this, right? So you kind of have to, as a designer, you have to consider all sorts of different points of views in order to develop something great and that satisfies everyone and it fits the audience that you're shooting for.
Now, what are the basic skills that somebody that is going into industrial design might need to have? I mean, I realize that you were really sort of on the early curve. You were thinking about this all the way back at the beginning of high school, but let's just suppose that a student is catching us tonight. Maybe they're in 11th grade and they're like, I think I'd like to explore this, but I don't have a portfolio put together, and I've heard that I need one. So how can a student like that coming in maybe on the later side still consider this?
Absolutely. So I in I kind of discovered industrial design of like I was lucky to find it freshman year, but I know a lot of people that even switched into it in college if you really if that's necessary. But I approached it from like the very engineering like standpoint. Like I was always told to be an engineer, and like I I didn't have like the math and such to back it up. And I don't honestly don't think I'd like to do that for the rest of my life. But I didn't really have too much experience in like art classes and such. So junior year and senior year, I took a couple art classes that really helped. And it sounds very strange to say that those art classes help, but kind of going into school, like I've seen the importance of it and the importance to look at the world like an artist and to see how products are designed and how like they're composed, and there's a lot of different artistic elements in that. Now, art classes aren't required, beforehand, but I think some experience in making things and some experience in creating, whether that be like anything from cake decoration, you're designing a cake, or just anything creative, just any sorts of drawings and such that you may have done. But I would say that it's not too late to jump into industrial design. There's a lot of people that come from that kind of engineering background that end up doing really well in industrial design, because first year is often oriented, or at least to RIT, to foundations. So there are different foundation courses that help teach you some of those basic artistic kind of, I don't know, artistic, yeah, capabilities or artistic kind of foundations. So I don't think it's too late to jump into it, but I think some of the biggest things would be to start reading and finding more about industrial design. And like I said, I can kind of link you some of those places. But yeah, I think just learning more about what companies are doing, what's the cutting edge right now, what's Apple doing, what's Samsung doing, like whatever you're interested in, whether that be sporting goods or that's pet toys. It's like kind of just looking at what's new, keep refreshing the site and seeing how a company presents a product and yeah, displays it.
So do you often find yourself sketching at college? Like, how important is the actual manual sketching versus are you using the rendering using the software?
Right. So we are taking they take you through different class. So the first year is a lot of foundation courses. So we have a class dedicated towards design sketching. I already done some of that in high school, so that has given me a leg up. But I know a lot of people haven't done that at all, and that they've come into the class and they've become really great sketchers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if you can do it in high school, that's great. But if not, it's definitely taught in school. And yeah, there's some sort of beginner kind of there's steps to lead you to becoming like actually doing projects and such. They teach you the skills and like the hard skills of sketching, rendering, 3D programming on the computer. But a lot of this, they don't recommend, you don't have to have that coming in, right? They will teach you that at most of these schools. But it is helpful to, if you have had experience in CAD or experience sketching, that would be helpful to display in a portfolio.
So you're doing some of your work in CAD and some of it manually at school?
Right, right. So it ranges from from sketching to like digital rendering, and I would say getting to know softwares like Adobe Illustrator. That would be one to start with. That's for like 2D kind of design, and then another one for like 3D that's free is Fusion 360. Those would maybe just be, you don't have to really learn it all in depth, but at least kind of knowing some of the basic things coming in could be really helpful. But yeah.
And so if a student is going to a school that does require a portfolio of 10 to 20 pieces and they've not had the experience with the sketching, how can they accrue that experience quickly?
Right. I think showing what things you've done that are creative. Because I went to, I think I told you this story. I went to a Carnegie Mellon portfolio review, and I had a lot of objects that I made, and I hadn't really had like the sketches and everything behind it. And they were a little bit tough on me, but overall they liked the work because it showed the final the final product. So I would say anything that you do creatively, I would include that in your portfolio. And it's bonus points, or it really kind of would set you apart if you show that kind of process behind it, if you show what that original idea is. Because that's a lot of what design is. It's the sketching is just one form to kind of get the idea out of your head. And then it's about the creation and what the final piece is. And if you can show that transition from this kind of little post-it note sketch or whatever to this final product, that really sets you apart rather than just showing the final thing. It shows kind of how you grew throughout the project.
Okay, so now that you're at college and you're working with all kinds of different students, what would you say the typical profile of a student would be who might be interested or industrial design or that should consider industrial design?
Right. I think it comes down to creativity. Everyone isn't creative. If you have, some sort of interest in products and product development, I think that'd be a great thing to learn, or great kind of reason to learn industrial design. A lot of the students I've talked to, they've had some experience in art and maybe even been pushed down the engineering path. But I think some sort of interest in product development and how things are created, and even some people that were considering like engineering in a lot of like STEM fields, because I found that my STEM classes in high school, they were sold as an engineering class, but they ended up being a lot more of an industrial design class, because you're going through that entire process from that initial brainstorm and initial research that you develop to the final product.
For example, which class would that be?
It would be some of the classes in the engineering tech class. So I don't want to call them out specifically,
Sure.
but yes, some of those kind of classes where I think one of them is like building a race car, or we did different things with just 3D printing and such. And an engineer would typically specialize in one specific part of that process, but the designer covers the entire thing. So designer goes from the strategy all the way to the final product, and including the sketching, prototyping, everything like that. Where the engineer would say, is this feasible? And they would do like a lot more like the math and technical parts behind it. That's a simplification of what the engineer and such would do. But from what I found, the more creative part of that class is often industrial design.
Now, you had thought of this early on, as you said. And so, like, what were some things maybe that you did outside of the high school experience, maybe in the summers and things like that, to sort of amplify, get exposure to the field, and then like help yourself get above?
Yeah. So I had worked at this one kind of makerspace.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this kind of place that had a lot of different kind of tools and equipment. And from going to that, I was able to network with a lot of different people and able to learn a lot from these different makers and people around Pittsburgh. So I come from it from a very maker centric kind of standpoint, where I was, laser cutting things, 3D printing things, and I didn't really have an understanding of, what it would like look like, or I didn't really care about that as much as just like the process. But whenever you're able to kind of incorporate that design into it, it makes it so much better. But I kind of some of the things from high school that I did was attend them in Makerspace, and there's another one in Pittsburgh now. And then even just getting involved in some of the arts and things around Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is a great scene for that as well. And then there's a lot of other like online communities that kind of fostered my kind of urge to design and create. And again, I can send those to you. And just following some of these designers has really helped me understand more what ID really is. To see a variation from people doing home goods and kind of these accessories all the way to the shoe design and such, and to see that kind of spectrum of what can be created and what can be done by an industrial designer was really inspiring. And also just to see the skill level of some of these people was pretty incredible. I think I talked with you about, I was at a conference for like industrial design, and I was the only high school student there, but there was this guy, he sketched like a chair, like a full chair in like maybe 3 seconds. And I was just mind blown. Like that was really inspiring, and like it really encouraged me to become better at sketching and become a better designer. But yeah, I think that really motivated me to see what professionals are doing, and like I'm at a student level right now. How do I get to this level, right? And it's with college, but you also need this kind of passion to do other personal projects and such. But yeah, no, I would I'll be happy to send those over to you.
Now, if a student wanted to follow you or some of your work, so that
Mhm.
instead of just jumping right to the professional, but maybe they wanted to say, well, what
Mhm.
what does the work look like of somebody at a freshman in college level? How can
Yeah,
they
yeah.
follow you?
Yeah, on Instagram, my tag or my handle is just chris.ference. But yeah, I post all sorts of different things that range from just experiments of what I'm doing in design, and all sorts of just kind of observations, sketches, prototypes, various things in the design process that I've kind of just done and just played around with, because I think a lot of design is exploration and experimentation, and I think that's what I try to do with my Instagram. But yeah, have them, yeah, feel free to
So
reach out
if that's
with that.
Chris dot Ference,
Yes,
Ference, right?
yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So you're at RIT. How are you liking RIT? Was that the right choice for you?
Yeah, I was talking with another student about this that actually attended SCAD, and
Oh,
they're very
South
different.
Carolina Arts and Design,
Sorry, Savannah.
and a
Yeah,
College
yeah,
of Art and Design, right?
right, right. So RIT is it's a more technical school, not necessarily an art school. And so you get the perspective from the engineers and the other like product design students instead of just going to a purely art school. I see the benefit now. Let me rephrase that. Coming from high school, I was very opposed to going to an art school because I thought, it's not giving that hard education. But I think going back, I would consider both. I don't think, if you have a more technical interest in design, I think a technical school is great. But I think RIT manages to balance the artistic element along with the kind of more technical element really well. But I would see the value in attending either a more technical college or an art school. But that just comes down to what you want to kind of pursue in the future. If you want to do more, you know, of a specific product category, there's different schools for that. So there's one school in California. It's called Art Center. That's more like directed to kind of consumer electronics versus some of the schools like Pratt in RISD. I know they have a really good like soft goods program, but schools like Georgia Tech, RIT, they teach you to be really well-rounded designers. I think that's one thing that's very different about those kind of schools.
Yes, and you were accepted at some of those other schools, and it sounds like you
Yes.
feel like you've made a good choice as you look back.
Yeah.
What is the field like in terms of marketability and that sort of thing?
Industrial design is quite competitive. It's it's because it's like such a fun kind of career, something that's very yeah, creative and very fun. I think it is very competitive, but I think that was encouraging to me just to kind of keep trying and keep pushing to, you know, to get to one of these like San Francisco firms, you know, that's like the end goal. But there's a lot of different kind of design jobs that you can take, even things like graphic design and such. As an industrial designer, you could fill that role if needed. Um, but yeah, I think it's very competitive, and I would just take a look at what kind of companies you'd want to look for and who they're hiring, right? If they're hiring industrial designers versus a product designer, which is more oriented now to like UI UX kind of design, which is more yeah, digital design. And they have that kind of degree too at RIT, but I would just see kind of what company you'd want to look for and then who they're hiring, to understand better, yeah, just like what your goals are for design. But it is a quite competitive industry.
Sounds like you're feeling really glad though that you made that choice and that you're feeling like you're in a good place, you're growing, and sounds like you're doing some amazing things.
Yeah. Yes, yes.
That's great. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, no
I'm going to
problem.
go ahead and end the recording now. And I encourage everybody that, you know, is checking this out to be able to, again, look at your Insta account so that they can see some of the work that you're doing. And as you said, follow some of the resources that you're going to provide. So, you know, thank you for
Yeah.
providing those.
Yeah, and don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be happy to help as you're doing your college search. I know it's a very stressful kind of thing, but I went through it, and hopefully I can provide some sort of insight into my experience and help you out a little bit. So
Yep. And I always encourage students to check out myfouryearplan.com for, you know, anything related to the full cycle of college planning. And so that, you know, is something that's available, you know, nationwide, worldwide, since, you know, as you know, I work with clients from all over the world. So yeah. So Chris, thank you so much for
yeah, no
joining me
problem.
here tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate